Welcome to the Own It Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast, a place where you can come to get what you need to move yourself forward. As you know, I'm Mary Baker and I'm here to give you the education, the tools, and the motivation to identify exactly what's in your way today and what you can do about it. Because remember, empowerment always comes from doing. It means truly identifying what's really going on, what's really causing issues. And the best part, the positive changes you can make to increase your self-confidence and take charge. Okay, so for several episodes now, we've been talking all about boundaries. Because the concept of boundaries has so many pieces to it, I've been trying to cover one of them each episode. So last week, we talked about healthier communication, our boundaries in our communication, and that episode pretty much goes hand in hand with this one, and that's boundaries in our behavior. So up front, I just want to let you know, it's sometimes hard to tease them out, and that's okay. But before we get into today's episode, I just want to take a moment and say thank you for all the wonderful positive feedback that I'm hearing. I'm hearing from you that these episodes are making you think, even if you've already been doing this work for a while. It's helping you look at yourself and your relationships and to start to make some honest changes. So that makes me feel so good. Because again, this is why I do this podcast, because I think it's a conversation that we need to have early and often to keep us healthier, to move us where we want to go, and to be healthier people for everyone around us. So it's a great thing. Okay, so let's talk about healthy boundaries in our behavior. Again, remember, boundaries are all about where you end and others begin. It's therefore about that healthy separateness, and it's all about taking personal responsibility for everything that belongs to you. Last week we talked a lot about taking a hard look at how you communicate and what healthy communication looks like versus unhealthy communication. And that emotional safety that healthy communication allows for and creates goes hand in hand with how we behave. I don't think we often walk into a room and demonstrate behaviors without talking to someone. Sometimes we do, but more often than not, it's combined with how we're communicating. Healthy boundaries in behavior show me and others in my life what I'm in charge of. I show them that by how I act. I show them that in ways that I take care of things that are mine or not. I show them that via my self-care, taking care of my health, my mental health, my money, my career. How well do I honor others' boundaries? So these are the broad topics that I want to dive into today around boundaries in our behavior. So, of course, let's talk about the unhealthy stuff. Now, I'm not going to be able to have time to name every unhealthy boundary-busting behavior, but I think I'm going to give you enough of a sense that you can go in your life and you can see more examples of that on your own. So one of the unhealthy behaviors that's pretty obvious is when you see someone punt. They deny. They deny responsibility. They defer. They turn around and blame you. They do not own. In other words, they manipulate. Now, if you need to learn more about manipulation, there's an episode on that. Check that out. In fact, if you're just coming into the boundary conversation with this episode, I strongly encourage you to go back and listen to the ones previous. It'll really help you. If you have poor boundaries in your behavior, you're often very reactive. You get upset when other people point out what needs to get done, etc., etc. Maybe something that you didn't take care of, something that you missed, you forgot, you didn't get to, you procrastinated on, and your reaction is probably going to have a lot to do with putting that blame or responsibility, whatever you want to call it, onto other people, on circumstances, onto everything, fill in the blank, that happened to prevent you from being able to follow through on that. And speaking of following through, people who struggle with boundaries don't often follow through. They promise, they really want to do things, but they can't. They are incongruent. They give lip service. They often, I think, overpromise and underdeliver. And it's because they fail to take into account the reality of time and money and energy, all those finite resources. In other words, not living in reality of what was really possible for them to get done that day. They're compulsively saying, yeah, sure, I can absolutely do that for you, without really sitting with themselves and saying, can I? Can I tell them that I can really do that and make that happen? How do I know that? Like, what's the reality surrounding that? Where's the opportunity for me to be able to make that happen? People who struggle with boundaries in their behavior also can resort to passive-aggressive behavior. They're not being emotionally honest. They said, yeah, sure, I'd love to do that for you, but they really don't want to do it, so they quote-unquote forget the thing they said they would do. They do it half-assed. They do it late. You get the idea. Poor boundaries means we don't own our choices either. And if we do it half-assed, we're frustrated because someone asked us. Reacting emotionally is another really big example of folks who struggle with boundaries in their behavior. They might instantly get upset. They might rage at you. They might blow up. They may shut down and not speak to you for several days. Maybe they just pretend they didn't hear you. They walk away. They change the subject, which really messes with my head when folks do that. They don't answer. And the real issue is they don't validate. They don't validate that you had a right to feel what you felt, ask for what you needed, that it is a real issue, and they choose not to do that. And again, some of this is not conscious, but some of it is. They are, quote unquote, teaching you, don't you dare bring these things to me because I can't handle them. I can't handle you being upset with me. I can't handle feeling like a screw up. I don't know how to fix the problem, to rescue you, to be perfect. I mean, all that stuff. And so they flip out. They can't handle it. But they're also manipulating, like we've talked about in previous episodes, because they're really holding you hostage and making it really impossible to broach subjects that need to be talked about. Now, I'm assuming you're approaching them in a healthier way. But even still. So I have so many people tell me, well, I just stopped asking because it just wasn't worth it. They would just flip out. I couldn't count on them to sit down with me and talk through it. So if you know someone in your life that's doing that, you want to think about, I need to really give them some harsh choices here. Either you choose to sit down with me, or I'm not going to be able to see you as a good partner. They often have poor impulse control, so they buy big things they can't afford, things they possibly don't need or probably won't use past 30 days. They'll sign up for activities with not as much regard for whatever else is going on that evening, whether they could afford to go. They don't think things through. It's kind of like an adolescent brain where they're all focused on Friday night. And often adolescents, right, don't look at the possible consequences of getting into someone's car you don't know, or driving too fast, or drinking and driving, and things like that. Their brains just aren't registering all of that. So it's a sign of immaturity. There's a lot of exaggeration, a struggle to stick to the facts. They may pay lip service to things that maybe they don't really care about, or you don't see it in their life, but they're just trying to fit in. Victim stance is another big one. It's everyone else's fault. They are not culpable at all. They don't take responsibility. They have lots of great reasons and excuses of why they couldn't get the thing done, of why they're struggling with money, of why they can't get ahead. Another form of struggling with boundaries that I think a lot of people can relate to is enabling, rescuing, and controlling. So you could be on the other side of the line with a chaotic person, and you're trying to fix them. You're trying to get them to see, get them to understand, get them to act right, get them to change. That is actually poor boundaries because you're not stepping back and saying, that is not my responsibility and I don't have any power to change it anyway. So you're blurring the lines a bit because you're like, no, I'll fix it. Someone's got to get in there and help them. Someone needs to care about them enough, so on and so forth. So a lot of controlling stuff, a lot of enabling and a lot of rescuing. And of course, there's tons of fear, invalid fear often that drives this. You're terrified. That's your kid. That's your partner. That's your sister. You want them to be okay. And doing boundary work is so key. I mean, go back to the episode around detachment if you haven't listened to that already, or maybe you need to listen to it again. And do some work around that and some grief work and all that stuff. I mean, that's why I included that, because you can't do one without the other. It's just really difficult. Trying to change any nouns that exist out of your skin, you will be in trouble. It's trying to get them to be different, and in essence, it's, I can't handle reality. So there comes the grief work. Finally, an aspect of someone who struggles with healthy boundaries is there's usually lots and lots of chaos born out of their irresponsibility. I know that sounds harsh, but it is. You know what I'm talking about, the tornado. There's always a crisis. It's crisis to crisis to crisis. And when one fire is put out, another one pops up almost immediately. It's actually pretty sad to watch. My encouragement is stay out of their swirl. If you step into the tornado, you're not going to do any good. They are the only ones who can decide that they're done. They're done swirling. They're tired. They're finished with chaos. They want to do healthy. They want to take responsibility. They want to actually have a plan. And make sure you don't have one of those things twirling around you as well. So those are some of the unhealthy behaviors. Again, not every one of them, but hopefully that gives you a sense. I mean, it's all about having a hard time accepting reality. It's having a hard time hearing no, saying no, and behaving in a calm manner in a grown-up way. So that's kind of what that is. It's a lot of immaturity. It's a lot of lack of emotional maturity, lack of emotional development. And I've talked enough on these episodes about that stuff goes way back. It's sad because there are valid reasons why these folks couldn't develop. And 9 times out of 10, it's because the grown-ups that were trying to raise them were not grown-ups. And so it literally stunts your emotional growth. A lot of times people didn't have healthy boundaries with them, so they didn't understand. Again, if you grew up in a family where there were no boundaries and everyone rescued one another and there was so much enmeshment, saying no meant abandoning someone and not caring. And so you have to look at the paradigm that you grew up with, look at the paradigm that maybe they grew up with, and see how that kind of fostered lack of boundaries. Okay, so let's flip the coin and talk about some healthier behavior where, and you know it's one of my favorite topics, taking responsibility. It's all about that at the end of the day, I think. But it's not just that simple phrase. There's a lot of pieces to taking responsibility. So there are 10 things here that I want to share with you, and I'm sure there are many more, but I was thinking about these are some of the most important ones I think to consider. And again, you can see other people in your life on this list, and some of these you may see yourself, and that's okay. Don't flip out. Just understand that if you struggle with some other things that we've talked about in these episodes, then my money is you probably struggle with some of these too, and a lot of it is not your fault, and the cool thing is it's very changeable. Okay, so the first one is, and I touched on it earlier, accepting the reality. Yeah, kicking and screaming to reality. The grief work, getting to acceptance, hitting that wall of things that you can't change. We mature when we see beyond the myopic of having it our way, of sitting in our own pain. Therefore, we don't act out as much when others present us with the reality. that thing. Because we understand they're presenting just facts. They're bringing an issue to us that's very real. And they have a right to do that, just as we do. The second thing is we are more objective and kind of neutral. We're not as combustible. We look at the facts. We have the ability to gain perspective. It may take us a day or two if it's a really big issue, but we're able to see from different points of view. Because also we've done enough of our own work, we can have some compassion and empathy. And everyone's not out to get us. And everyone's not evil. And the universe is not plotting our demise. We're practicing detachment too. Enough, right? Just to be calmer and more reasonable and approachable. Therefore, there's not as much fight or flight behavior because we're in a place of choice. We want to hear them out. We want them to be able to bring issues to us. We want to be seen as a grown-up who's not afraid of conflict. We are able, for the most part, to sit down calmly and discuss a situation, even when it's difficult. We're able to have that actual, meaningful, and scary as hell sometimes conversation where we might risk someone saying that we're wrong. We risk being called out on a behavior. We risk feeling the actual guilt of something we've done. But we do the grown-up thing and we don't run. Raging, slamming your fist on the table, diverting, distracting, manipulating, that's all running. And avoiding is running too. Blaming, I think, is running like hell from reality. That's a whole nother session. We get ourselves into a place of choice, and the more you work at this, the better you will get. In other words, the quicker you will be able to get there in a conversation with someone. In the beginning, no. You're going to have to walk away, go in the bathroom, shut the door, have a seat, and get things straight with you, like I always say. So therefore, we don't scream and yell at others as much. You hear me say as much because there ain't no perfect here. We don't act out because we don't feel victimized. We see the value in someone else being upset because we value our own feelings. We see the value of them bringing something that they need because we honor our own needs. We see the value in them being pissed off because we blew it. We get it. We have separateness. And we therefore have empathy and compassion. Maybe not immediately, but at least within the first 24, we can go back and say, I'm so sorry. You're right. You have a right to be pissed. I blew it and I feel awful. Can we talk? Number 5. Oh boy, and this is a big one in my book. We mean what we say and we follow through. We show others by our behavior that we can be trusted. We stick to agreements. When I work with relationships, I think one of the biggest issues is they don't know how to manage conflict. But a lot of what's inside of that is they don't know how to make agreements and negotiate. People assume they already know how to do it. And unless you witness that and that was modeled for you or you took a class, that's probably going to be hard. Because if you grew up in a chaotic family, forget it. Either there was no conflict, so you never witnessed anyone doing it in a healthy way or asking for what they needed, or it was god-awful and you wanted nothing to do with that. So when I talk about agreements between two people, there is your end of the bargain and there is their end of the bargain. And this could be something tiny from who's going to pick up milk to infidelity in a marriage and everything in between. So here are the ground rules that I give people. You make an agreement with them. If anything changes on your end of the bargain between when you made the agreement and when the thing was supposed to happen, the onus is on you to go to them and first validate and say, hey, I know we talked last night and we agreed, but this just blew up for me. And you have a right to still make me stick to the agreement. But can we talk? Or you let them know what you're going to do to make up for it. Like if you said you would pick up milk on the way home and you forgot to get gas, you're like, crap, I need to stop. So you text them and say, hey, I'm getting milk, but I'm going to be a little late because I have to get gas. Is that okay? And we can negotiate it out. Or maybe you end up being sick and they say, no, I'll go get milk. You're not feeling well. Just come home. But what matters is if And only if they witness over time, on average, you upholding your end of the bargain, they will have trust in you, and that you can negotiate it in a mature way and honor the agreement and honor that we made the agreement and honor that we need to trust. If you don't do that, there won't be trust. And if we don't learn how to negotiate, how do we problem solve? So that's why I included that in boundaries in behavior, because how we behave, we have a choice. There are bennies and consequences, and you will be tempted when you start trying to be more congruent and honor your agreements with your partner and with your kids and with your colleagues and with your mama. You're going to get tempted. And it's up to you. What do you want? Do you want them to trust you? Do you want to trust you? You know, a lot of these things we're talking about today, I'm more concerned about you looking in the mirror and how you feel in the morning than what they think of you. Everything should work inside out and everything's good. If we get things straight with ourselves, other people will trust us and have more confidence in us. All right, so let's move on. Here's the neighbor to number 5 is number 6. We commit. We make commitments. And we stay committed. It's not a 2-week, yeah, that sounds great. Nope, sorry, not really kind of thing. I can tell you in relationships, that will blow trust faster than anything. We thoughtfully commit. We take the consequences into account. We think ahead. We own the commitment. We're like, okay, if I do that in 6 months from now, am I still going to want to be doing this? What else could get in the way? That's a big one I think people unintentionally do. They don't broadly think like, yeah, I can do this for a week, but then I'm going to have a schedule conflict. So we have to take complete ownership of that before we say yes. Number 7, for the most part, we are responsible with money. We are therefore, again, in reality, around these finite resources of money and being able to make money. We have a budget. A budget itself is just boundaries around buckets of money, like how much we need for mortgage or how much we need for rent or how much we need for groceries. What's the reality? We save. We don't overspend. We plan for the future. We earn. We conserve. And the biggest thing, again, delayed gratification is really all about, do I have the money to buy that? And borrowing, a lot of controversy around this. Some people say, if I have to borrow that money, outside of a mortgage, can I really afford it? Really? If I can't pay for it now, what am I doing? Again, outside of a mortgage, and maybe even outside of huge emergency, but good boundaries are proactive where we have that emergency fund. We take into account that the car is going to die and the washer will break down at some point. So again, as you can see, it's more and more of an embracing of reality so that you can plan and take responsibility. Irresponsible is, those things will never happen. Number 8, we respect other people's time and energy by trying to be on time the best we can. We therefore take responsibility for saying yes. And what we say yes to, and we don't overbook, and we don't double book, and we don't try to pile so much on in the day that it makes it almost impossible for us to be places where we need to be on time. I think it was Stephen Covey talks about when you're doing time management and I used to be really bad at this, adding in what he called buffer time. And what buffer time looks like is give yourself always an extra 10 to 20 minutes, whatever you can afford, for stuff to happen. And I wouldn't do that. I would be unrealistic and say, I can make it there in time. Nope. It's accounting for red lights, flat tires, accidents, constructions, acts of God, whatever, for life to hit the fan. And it's only going to do that, right, when you're running late. So he said, be more realistic for life to show up. And the worst thing that will happen is you're 10 minutes early, right? If you get all green lights and everything's cool, at least you accounted for buffer time. And adding in buffer time requires discipline, and it requires saying no to some things. So as you continue to do this boundary work, don't be hard on yourself with that. Just start by adding 10 minutes here, saying no here. Do a little bit at a time, tweak it, get a sense of how long you think things take. If not, ask. But your focus is, am I being realistic about this or not, and why? Number 9, we don't have constant chaos going on in our life in a way where a lot of it could be said to be self-inflicted. I know that sounds kind of harsh, but that's often the case. And that means, too, taking responsibility for who we put in our life, for setting boundaries around toxicity and other people's problems that you have no business and no time to help with. You can care about them, you can love them, but if you're constantly running around taking care of everyone else, you're not going to have time for the stuff that you need to get done. So then here comes the chaos in your own home. Oftentimes it's the goodness of our heart that gets us in trouble. So we have to be responsible and, I think, thoughtful about how we give and where we give. We care, but we don't caretake. We don't distract either from things that we don't want to deal with by helping other people, because there's a famous one. And 10, we seek help. We don't have to be right. We don't have to have all the answers. And we seek help from mentors, coaches, therapists, teachers, for things we can't heal by ourselves, things we're not good at, things we just don't know, and it's okay. Maybe they do. So taking that step, I can tell you in relationships, when someone has the courage to ask for help, it builds tremendous trust in their partner. Oh my gosh, even in their kids. The humility and showing that you're open and you're teachable and you mean it, and that you see the reality that you can't fix this by yourself, and that you're willing to reach out and be vulnerable and let someone help you, shows tremendous maturity and courage. And again, if the more that you can do that, the more confidence, ironically, that people around you will have, because they will trust that if you don't got this, you'll get help to got this. You're not going to try to do it yourself with duct tape and all, and it's going to be a mess. You're not coming off as being rigid and not teachable and right and so insecure that you're not willing to ask for help. So I think that's a big one too. Are we open to help? So provide a contrast here of what healthy versus unhealthy behavior looks like, and how it relates and why it relates to boundary work. Again, we could spend 6 more hours and I wouldn't be done talking about just this aspect of boundary work. But hopefully it gives you a good sense of what this stuff looks like, and that you can assess kind of not just yourself, but those around you, so you know what's going on. You can understand it better. So I've included some great journal questions for you to take the work a little deeper, because I think that's what you guys are telling me that you're loving. You love these questions and these handouts, so you can really marinate in this stuff and get your money's worth, so to speak. Just go to ownitpowercast.com and sign up if you haven't already, and you will have access to that. And those who are tribe members already, you've got in your newsletter, you're covered. The other thing I want to encourage as you're trying to change these behaviors is join our Facebook group for more support. The link to that is in the show notes. And so many of you tell me you wish you had a safe community. So I want to encourage more of you to come in, and those of you in there, participate more. You got to put your neck out there a little bit, because we are only as sick as what we don't like about ourselves, is what I say. And when you put that on the table, you lighten your load, but you also make it safe for someone else to share. So remember that. And hey, if you found this helpful today, please put out a positive review. You'll be helping others find this podcast and get the help that they need as well. And pass the podcast on via word of mouth. And keep growing. You're doing great. So keep paying it forward, keep focusing on you, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you can begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now so you can really own it later.